Welcome back to part 2 of the Cedar Fair lineup bracket. If you haven't seen part 1, it'll be linked down below, go check it out and then come back here later. Now as a quick reminder, here's how part 1 went. In round 1, 6 seed Knott's Berry Farm knocked off number 11 seed World of Fun. 7 seed California's Great America knocked out 10 seed Dorney Park, and 8 seed Valley Fair scored a close victory over Michigan's Adventure. Now to start round 2, 1 seed Cedar Point blew out Valley Fair, and CGA nearly upset 2 seed Canada's Wonderland before a tiebreaker. So let's continue. Number 3, Kings Island versus number 6, Knott's Berry Farm. A pair of powerhouses to start us off here. Knott's, as we know from the first round, will feature 10 coasters with the arguable top 3 of Ghost Rider, Accelerator, and Silver Bullet. You can argue Hang Time, but we're going to stick with the invert. Kings Island sports a 14 coaster collection and have plenty to choose from top 3 wise. Let's pull out Orion, Mystic Timbers, and Banshee for a little bit of diversity. Starting with the inverts, there really couldn't be a different pair of the same model, with Silver Bullet being a smaller scale invert that goes over the parkways with a shallow drop and a very smooth ride. Banshee is the world's longest and has intensity and a rattle to spare. While the rattle is overwhelming in some portions of the train, the intensity of the ride experience of Banshee really can't be ignored here, and they'll take the first point. Moving on to the steel giants of their parks, Accelerator and Orion. The prototype Intimate Launch Coaster and the B&M Giga are a very interesting pair of rides to compare here. Typically, I will lean towards a longer ride that's re-rideable, has airtime, for picking my favorite rides at least, but the expectations here are a little different, and there's exceptions to those rules. Now, a out-of-the-station, world-renowned launch is definitely one of those exceptions. While Orion is tons of fun, it's simply a bit too mild, while Accelerator leaves a rider much more satisfied with a much faster and quicker ride experience, tied up at 1-1. Then we have the high-end wooden coasters of each park. Mystic Timbers at Kings Island is an out-and-back ride full of airtime dips and hills that throws riders around in the best way possible. It runs like a shiny new Woody, and the only flaw might be that it tears through its course a little too quickly. Now Ghost Rider is a CCI with a GCI renovation, and the larger scale coaster is an L-shaped layout that laps around itself. This one has to be one of the closer calls of the tournament so far, but Ghost Rider has the reputation of not only being an elite wooden coaster, but a top-end ride overall, and I'm going to give it the very slight edge over one of my personal favorites, mostly because that longer ride experience, 2-1 Knott's. Then we have the remaining supporting rides, which seems a little bit unfair here. Simply put, Diamondback, Beast, Flight of Fear, Bat, and Racer pretty much outstack Hang Time, Montezuma's, Coast Riders, Pony Express, and Sierra Sidewinder any way you cut it. Kings Island ties it up 2-2 with the support, so we move to the tiebreaker. Now, if you don't remember from the last episode, the tiebreaker will be the 4th best coaster in each park. Now, many will argue that it should have been Banshee here, but it's going to be Diamondback facing off against Hang Time. Now, Hang Time is a beautiful ride with a really fun looking layout. 5 inversions and 96 degrees definitely hold up, but Diamondback is a top-end B&M hyper. Rattle included, this ride is amazing. The airtime is the strongest on any B&M I've ridden, and it just simply outclasses Hang Time. Kings Island advances here, score 3-2. Number 4, Carowinds versus number 5, King's Dominion. Now the first matchup of top 5 seeds is a good one. Carowinds and King's Dominions feature 14 and 13 coasters respectively. The top 3 matchups will be Fury 325, Copperhead Strike, and Afterburn versus Intimidator 305, Twisted Timbers, and Flight of Fear. Let's start with the launch coasters. It's an old school indoor premiere and the modern sleek mock. Flight of Fear is an underrated experience in my opinion, with a decent launch and a disorienting ride experience. However, the dark can help the rattle and the shin guards on this ride, while Copperhead is a hang time and airtime filled ride. The circular loops and JoJo roll are the notable elements, and there's plenty of sneaky airtime moments sprinkled throughout, but it has perhaps the weakest launch around. This is one of the harder picks. They're both solid launch coasters that do different things well, but I think it's going to go to Copperhead for the 1-0 lead to Carowinds. Next up is a bit of a wild card matchup. We have Afterburn and Twisted Timbers. One of the most intense inverts in the world, Afterburn is just under 3,000 feet of track, but riders feel like it's a lot more, especially during that big Batwing element. Twisted Timbers is an airtime masterpiece from RMC, and since its conversion, it's been one of the most popular rides around. People gush over the triple camelbacks, and personally, I think the cutback element is extremely underrated. It's simply a tier above Afterburn in most elements. It's not a blowout, but it's definitely a simple point to Twisted Timbers to tie the score. Then we have the Gigas. Fury 325, the consensus best B&M, and I-305, perhaps the most intense ride in the world. So take your pick. You want the speed and airtime machine that rides on glass, or do you want the NASCAR race squeezed into 2.5 minutes of pure intensity? It's a really difficult choice, and both rides have their haters, but where Orion is mild and unoriginal, Fury is perfectly crafted. And as much as I love I-305, Fury just does everything too well, while I-305 is a perfect one-trick pony. Point goes to Carowinds. So at 2-1, we look at what's left. Now both are headlines by Big B&M, Intimidator, the B&M Hyper, Nighthawk, and 9 boring, trash, or family coasters for Carowinds, and King's Dominion Sports Dominator, the B&M Floorless, Racer 75, Tambili, Backlot Stunt Coaster, and 6 more trash, boring, or family coasters. It comes down to if that little bit of extra quality can top the gap between Intimidator and Dominator. And honestly, even if they do tie, Intimidator is gonna win that tiebreaker of that 4th coaster, so Carowinds takes the advantage 3-1. So round 2 is over. We will see number 1 Cedar Point face off against number 4 Carowinds, and number 2 Canada's Wonderland deal with number 3 Kings Island. No big upsets this week, but look out for next week as really anything can happen. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the semifinals next week here from the shores of Island Coasters.